Okay. So just so folks know, we are uh, live streaming to YouTube. Uh, if you can have yourself on mute, and except for on the times when we're doing some questions and answers, that would be great. Just get this. So welcome everyone. We're so uh, honored that you are joining us tonight as we come to the end of Tisha B'Av. It is a time of mourning traditionally in the Jewish community, but also a time of reflection and learning, and learning about what we have done right and what we've done wrong. And we will take that broader tradition today and apply it to the questions of not the destruction of the temple in ancient Jerusalem, but of temple earth. What we are mourning, what has us in grief, and what we need to do to bring healing. I This is being co-sponsored by the Shalom Center, thanks to Rabbi Arthur Waskow, along with the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life that I'm the executive director of, and with support from Jewish Earth Alliance and Dayenu, and also the invaluable wisdom of Reverend Mitch Hescox, who is our colleague who runs the Evangelical Environmental Network. So let me start by inviting Rabbi Waskow to share with us a reflection on the grief part of the evening as we begin our evening together. Arthur, if you could unmute.
Yes. There is a tradition in many circles that we light candles, essentially yahrzeit candles, to recognize the deaths that have occurred on Tisha B'Av, beginning with the death of the priests who were serving in the first of the sacred temples in Jerusalem. And now we find ourselves with many deaths in just the last week in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and in British Columbia from overwhelming heat, and in Europe from overwhelming floods, unheard of heat and unheard of floods, scorched into being by the burning of fossil fuels. So we are going to begin with the lighting of two candles, one for Adam and one for Adamah, one for earth, Adamah, and one for Adam, the human earthlings. In Hebrew, the interweaving of earth and earthlings like this is much clearer than in English when we talk about the environment, which is somewhere out there in the world. And I want to begin with kavanah, a focus for our memory, our grief, and our action. As we'll probably hear later, the Jewish people, in its deep sense of resilience and hope, said that on this day, on the day of destruction, the Mashiach, the Messiah, would be born and would be hidden away until the days when we all, the human race and earth, were ready to make the messianic time of peace and justice and healing happen. We are the generation that stands between the fires. Behind us are the burning crosses lit by hate to choke our people in the smoke of terror. Behind us are the smoke and flame that rose from Auschwitz and from Hiroshima. Not yet behind us, the burning forests of the Amazon, torched for the sake of fast hamburger and fast wealth. Not yet behind us, the glare of gunfire exploding in our children. Not yet behind us, the hottest years of human history that bring upon us melted ice fields, flooded cities, scorching droughts, murderous wildfires.
Oops, you got muted. There.
Before us, we, among all life forms, face the nightmare of a flood of fire, the heat and smoke that could consume all earth. Here, the day is coming, said the prophet Malachi, that will flame like a furnace. Says Yah, the infinite interbreath of life. Yet, says Malachi, for all who revere God's interbreathing name, Yah, a shining solar sun of justice will arise with healing in its sunshine, its rays, its winds. Here, says Malachi, in the very last words of the last of the prophets, the ancient Hebrew prophets, here I will send you the prophet Elijah to turn the hearts of the elders to their youth and the hearts of youth to their elders, lest I come and smite the earth with utter desolation. Here, we ourselves are coming, for we ourselves must turn the hearts of elders and youth to each other, so that this day of smiting does not fall upon us. We ourselves are coming to douse that outer, all-consuming fire. So we must light again in our own hearts the inner fire of love and liberation that burned in the burning bush. The fire that did not consume even the bush it burned in. For the fire of love is strong as death. Love's fire must never be extinguished. The fire in the heart of all creation. It is our task to make from inner fire not an all-consuming blaze, but the loving light in which we see more clearly the rainbow covenant glowing in the many colored faces of all life.
Thank you, Arthur.
Wait 1 second.
Sure.
Oh, so this is the fire of hope, a symbol of the inner fire for Adam, for humanity. And this is the fire of Adamah, the inner fire of the whole planet, of all life forms. Our cousins, our mother, our beloved. That was Rabbi Phyllis Berman who brought the fire, the inner fire. Go ahead. Yeah.
Amen, and thank you. Next, we'll continue with Rabbi Sue Morningstar, who has taken the long tradition of rabbinic commentary upon the Book of Lamentations from the day that it was first chanted. It's traditional to chant Echa, but also to think about its words and bring them into our own hearts. And this is her version of that.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. Echa yashva badad ha'ir bati'am ha'eta ke'amana Echa, alas, she sits abandoned. Earth's abundance, once green and flourishing, is slowly disappearing. We have come through trying times, the great pause of distancing and hermiting. So many have lost lives, others suffer long-term consequences. Rushing, we shed our masks in celebration of our freedom. But safety is an illusion when variants lurk and our planet is suffering. As we emerge from this cursed blessing, have we learned our crucial lessons? 16 months of quieted highways, pollution cleared, human and animal lives saved. 16 months of quieted skyways, airplane travel ceased, vistas no longer concealed. Viewing the magnificence of the Himalayas, city skylines were suddenly revealed. Now we have resumed our toxic flying as United proudly announces hundreds of new planes buying, endlessly consuming our fruits we plunder, while thousands of children die daily of hunger. Fires threaten, earth's parched and dry. We pack our go bags and watch the sky. Oceans rising, temperatures climbing, rainforest shrinking, Shekhinah crying. We weep without consolation. There is no comfort to refresh our souls. What will it take to wake us up to the destruction and planetary crisis? What will it take? Unbearable heat waves burn our skin like an oven, while our mother self-destructs. Our creeks and rivers have run dry, crops and fishes wither and die. Polarity, meanness, and hatred are everywhere. Racism, xenophobia, and injustice prevail. The joy in our hearts has ceased. Our dancing has turned into mourning. Anti-Semitism on the rise from the left and the right. All of our enemies have opened their mouths wide against us. Returning to our homeland after 2,000 years, cousins still divided in fear. On this day, we remember the siege of our holy Jerusalem and the destruction of our holy temples. On this day, we remember the start of the Crusades, the expulsions of our people from England, France, and Spain. On this day, we remember Kristallnacht and the Warsaw Ghetto. Is it our terrible destiny for history to repeat itself? Here in America, violence in our streets, 30 million adherents follow QAnon. We've lost our trust in our government. We've lost our trust in our journalists. We've lost our trust in our judicial system, in our electoral process, and even in science. Look and see, pain upon pain, your sanctuary plundered, your planet overrun. What will it take to wake us up, to choose healing and love, compassion and cooperation? When will we heed this warning? When will we protect our future generations? Your brokenness is as vast as the sea. Who can heal you? Let us sit alone in quiet reflection and let our souls fill with God's compassion. Hashivenu ya elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. Renew our days and return us to you. Help us reach awareness in the midst of somnolence. Can you hear that sound? May it be so.
May it be so indeed. Thank you so much, Rabbi Morningstar. It's a beautiful interpretation, and it closes with the second to last line of Lamentations, Hashivenu, that fills us with hope in the midst of despair. Stop our share here for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about that process of learning before we start hearing from other stories of today and ways that we can join in action to fulfill that hope of returning. So in the biblical book of Lamentations, that may or may not have been written specifically about the destruction of the first temple, has been interpreted from early on in light of that destruction, and then in light of additional destruction since then. And part of that early and continued interpretation may strike us in modernity as a little bit off, a little bit in the light of blaming the victim. It talks about how all of these bad things that have happened are because of the wrongs that we have committed. And yet, as much as we might want to reject the idea of a simple cause and effect of tragedies happening to people because they deserve them, there is a deeper sense that we affect the world through our actions, and that in turn shapes the destiny not only of ourselves but of each other. In the 5th and 6th century, there was compiled a series of midrashic sermons about the cycle of readings that lead up to and follow Tisha B'Av, called Pesikta de Rav Kahana. The 3 haftarot in front of Tisha B'Av that talk to the sins of the people and their need to see what they did, and the 7 of consolation that follow. And Pesikta Rav Kahana shifted from a look at guilt to a look at responsibility. How is it that the ways that we don't hear and don't understand and don't take responsibility lead to tragedy? And that idea of understanding what's happening around us and our contribution to it and our responsibility, not only for acknowledging our role in the problems, but in acknowledging our power to work towards solutions, has always been a strain since and before even that midrash of the way that we look at Tisha B'Av. One of my teachers, Rabbi Lou Barth, Dean Emeritus of the Los Angeles campus of the Hebrew Union College, used to talk to us about his thinking of Tisha B'Av as kind of a societal Yom Kippur. It is the only fast that, like Yom Kippur, lasts from sunset to sunset and has a full period of mourning like the fasting and afflictions of Yom Kippur. But rather than just look at what I have done and the ways that I need to repent, to focus on what we have done, what we have failed to hear, to understand, and to take responsibility for. And if we are paying any attention to the world around us right now, the signs are clear that in so many ways that we see more and more direct suffering because of climate change. And that we have, in this strange time that we live in now, of existence that is partly in person and partly virtual, both greater challenges and a whole new set of opportunities in how we reach out and connect and support each other for change. So we have this possibility to move from blaming the victim or focusing on guilt or even focusing on past tragedies, and to wake up, as Rabbi Morningstar's words, as so much of our tradition, as the whole idea of lifting up our voices like a shofar that Isaiah calls to us in the Haftarah of Yom Kippur morning. That we turn this not reflecting to the fires behind us or even the fires around us, but the fires that could be in the future, but do not yet have to be. And our limited time to turn the hearts of the parents to children and the hearts of children to parents, to hear the voices of new generations, to take responsibility for past actions, and to move into the future. We hope that through the words and images that we share tonight, that we will inspire each other and that we will share our inspiration in broader and broader circles to bring about some of this needed change. So now we're going to hear from three people who have each in their own way worked for this change and continue to. First from Mirla Goldsmith, who will talk about her journeys on Pipeline 3 and what she has seen and what we can do. I want to put in the chat at this point some links for further information about what Mirla is going to talk about, and things that you can do to follow up from this moment. So now let me turn things over to Mirla.
Good evening. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that we are on. Wherever you may be, let us acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, which is on Piscataway land. Where Line 3, the pipeline that I'm going to talk to you about tonight, is located is on the traditional and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and the Dakota peoples. By uplifting the name of these lands and the community members from these nations, we acknowledge the historical, spiritual, and personal oppression that they have experienced, and affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and the theme of this evening, love, as we work side by side to protect Earth and all of her inhabitants. I traveled to northern Minnesota as part of a multi-faith delegation to the Treaty People gathering just about a month ago. When we arrived in Minnesota, we began with the Havdalah ceremony, sharing our own Jewish rituals that acknowledge our place in nature. Together, all of us, Jews and non-Jews, watched for 3 stars to appear to mark the end of Shabbat and the transition to the week ahead. We said, Hinei el Yeshuati, evtach velo evchad. God is here with us. I will trust and not be afraid. God is my song, my help, and my strength. We will draw in joy from the saving waters. God's blessings are all around us. Line 3, which is now under construction, is a pipeline that is intended to carry tar sands from Alberta, Canada, through northern Minnesota to Superior, Lake Superior in Wisconsin. The company behind the pipeline is called Enbridge Energy. Line 3 is a direct threat to clean water, Indigenous livelihoods, treaty rights, climate change, and the world we love. So why is Line 3 such a threat? Let me go into those 3 reasons that I just mentioned. First of all, the pipeline violates treaty rights and threatens the livelihoods and lives of Native peoples in northern Minnesota. The route that Enbridge has been approved for crosses hunting grounds, hundreds of streams, and most importantly, 43 wild rice lakes. Wild rice is considered a sacred food by the Native peoples, and they have the rights, according to the treaties, to gather this food in perpetuity. As we all know, this is one in a long line of violations of treaty rights. The Native people that we met asked us especially to talk about the threat to lives of Indigenous women. When pipeline companies come in to build pipelines, I'm sure you've all read about this, there's a lot of violence that goes along with that. Line 3 is a direct threat to clean water. The route crosses almost 200 bodies of water, including the Mississippi River twice. And when tar sands, which is what will be carried by this pipeline, spill, this is extremely heavy oil, and it sinks to the bottom of whatever the water body is, and it's almost impossible to clean up. And we all know that there will be spills. There are always spills. When we arrived in Minnesota, Winona LaDuke, one of the leaders of the opposition to the pipeline, spoke to us. She asked us, how many rivers are there? Think about that. How many lakes are there? How many oceans are there in the world? The answer is that there's only one. There's one body of water and one water cycle on the entire earth. And in fact, that water circulates through our bodies too. We all know that it's imperative to protect our clean water, but she put it in a different perspective for me. And then of course, line 3 will accelerate climate change. The pollution that this pipeline would cause is staggering. Line 3 will carry this very carbon intensive oil, tar sands oil. And the additional oil that would be transported through this pipeline is the equivalent of the total carbon dioxide daily emissions of 16 to 18 million cars every year. It's also like, or the other comparison we can use is it's like adding 50 new coal-fired power plants. Just think about that, 30 or 50 years of that. It's totally insane. But if that pipeline does not get built, the oil does not move. You may hear people say, well, if you don't put it in the pipeline, it'll be trucked or it'll be put on trains, but that's really not true. Pipelines are the only way to move tar sands out of Alberta that's cheap enough for the industry to justify. And every time a pipeline project is canceled or looks unlikely to get built, the producers respond by canceling new extraction projects. So they will not pump this oil or extract it. I don't even know if pump is the right word, if this pipeline does not get built. This is where the tar sands oil comes from, the boreal forest in Alberta. These boreal forests play an important role in the reduction of climate change by capturing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It actually capture, and I was astounded by this, twice as much carbon dioxide as tropical forests to help regulate the climate. This is a picture of the forest after extraction. Tar sands extraction turns the landscape into a wasteland. Sadly, almost 2 million acres of forest were lost or degraded in the tar sands region between 2000 and 2012. This rate, again, an astounding fact, exceeds even the deforestation rate in the Brazilian rainforests. Now here's the good news. Indigenous people in Minnesota have been leading opposition to this pipeline for 7 years. And they've tried everything, including tree sitters who stayed for 10 days on the site of a clear cutting for a drill pad at the crossing of the Mississippi River. But they haven't stopped it quite yet. So Indigenous women leaders put out a call for people to come from all over the country in order to get national attention for this fight. I really didn't know anything about Line 3, but a young friend of mine, Michael Greenberg, called me and he said, can you come to Minnesota? I just have to say that I met him at his graduation from the local Jewish day school when my nephew was graduating. So excited about our younger generation. Well, when he asked me, I just couldn't say no. So I ended up going to Minnesota with my friend Dee Herman, who's on the call tonight, who's a member of the Jewish Earth Alliance Steering Committee, and Marianne Comfort, who's who works with the Sisters of Mercy here in Washington, and Dee and I work with her quite a bit on advocacy on Capitol Hill. And my niece, Bela Unger, joined us. She's a student at Columbia University. The Native women in Minnesota specifically asked for people of faith to show up for this fight. And Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light and Green Faith answered the call and organized a multi-faith delegation. I just want to emphasize here that faith communities really have an important role to play in this movement. We were proud that there was actually quite a large Jewish contingent. Many were recruited by Congregation Shir Tikva in Minneapolis and by Dayenu. That's me and Dee at the pipeline site. I learned so much by going to this gathering. First of all, I learned so much about the history of the Native peoples from the elders who shared their stories. I really didn't understand before I went why this gathering was called a treaty people gathering. The reason is that we are all parties to the treaties, not just the Native Americans. The message is that we have a mutual obligation, and we all know that that obligation has been violated over and over. We have a responsibility to the Native Americans, and this is one way we can fulfill it, by helping them in this struggle. I also want to say something about love. People came from everywhere to this gathering, people of all ages. We came to this place that was very rural, with really, no services to support this type of a gathering. And hundreds of volunteers took care of us. On the day before the action, we had a day of training. There were well over 1,000 people, and the volunteers who were leading the effort trained us on direct action, on our rights, should we be arrested, and served us meals. The thing that most impressed me was that there were many volunteers who came up from Minneapolis just to shuttle us around. In this area, there were no parking lots. Where are you going to put 10 cars for 1,000 people? People just came and volunteered to help. The weather was over 95, basically, the whole time that we were there. And unfortunately, during that training day, I succumbed to heat exhaustion. So I never made it to the action the next day. And at first I didn't want to talk about that because it seemed to me that it was taking away from the story. But actually, if you think about it, that is the story, because heat waves are increasing everywhere, including in northern Minnesota. I was very grateful to have friends with me, like Dee, who took me to the hospital to get treated for the heat exhaustion. But not everybody has that. I just want to say that this photo, I missed the action. So before we left, I was indulged by my friends, and we went to one of the pipeline sites. You can see the pipelines there. This is what they do. They clear cut, and then they lay these pipes to have our own little protest and have a photo op with this beautiful banner that Dee created. I also just want to say that probably the most beautiful moment for me was that before we left, we visited the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And this really felt like a sacred moment to be able to experience, to feel these waters that were going to flow down to the Mississippi River. We also learned there that the Mississippi River watershed is 40% of the United States. So this water that we're protecting in Minnesota is contributing to that mighty river that is shared by so many people. So what can you do? We can stop Line 3. Bill McKibben has called Line 3 Keystone, the sequel, because it's really the same thing. It's supposed to bring the tar sands oil, out of Alberta to be used. And that pipeline is now dead. We all know that. President Biden canceled it or revoked the permits, and the company canceled it completely. So it's not coming back from the dead. And line 3 can be the next one. The main thing that we can do right now is to pressure President Biden. Daniel has already put these links in the chat, so please copy them. And tonight, before the fast is over, whichever way you want to do it, please take action by contacting President Biden. You can also participate in the Stop the Money pipeline, which is the campaign to pressure the banks that are funding this pipeline to stop their financing. Without money, it won't go forward. So you can contact, if you go to Stop the Money pipeline, there's an email that you can send and information about calling. I wanted to share that my congregation, Adat Shalom in Bethesda, Maryland, is participating in the Stop the Money pipeline campaign. Over this past year or so, we've been encouraging our members to stop doing business with these banks that are financing fossil fuel infrastructure. And one of the easiest ways that you can get started, and a good way to educate people about the role of the financing in the fossil fuel economy, is to ask them to change to a credit card that's issued by a socially responsible bank, such as a credit union. So we partnered with Green America, and we've been promoting the Green America credit card. And as it happens, this coming Shabbat, we're going to be celebrating the end, well, I shouldn't say the end, but the milestone in our campaign on Tisha B'Av, the holiday of love. And if anyone's interested in doing this, I'd be more than happy to talk with you about it. And I'm just going to finish up with this little video that from the Faith Gathering, because I want you to hear directly from Winona LaDuke, one of the Native leaders, about why we're fighting this pipeline.
So when we think about who we are as treaty people, we're coming from all over now. This is a national issue, and we're standing up behind Indigenous leaders like our dear sister Winona LaDuke and other Indigenous leaders who've been standing up and helping us have a guiding light by how they're leading. Let's say it out loud. We see you.
We see you.
We're with you.
We're with you.
We're gonna walk with you all the way until this pipeline is stopped.
We're gonna walk with you all the way until this pipeline is stopped.
It's really a remarkable time that we are here now, and we all know it. You know, I like what Erin Dottie Roy says when she talks about pandemic as portal. She says in the history of the world, pandemics have forced societies to change, and this one's no different. You know, so I'm so grateful y'all came out, because, you know, when we signed the treaty, you could drink all the water from every creek, right? And every lake and every river. And our understanding is that's how it would continue. You know, our treaties were agreements that our ancestors, our people were negotiating these treaties that would protect our rights for generations ahead. You know, from our perspective, we're all going to keep pushing, and we need you to be there with us. So it's not just our problem, it's everybody's problem.
Yes.
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 So one of the things is that we actually need infrastructure for people, not for oil companies.
Right. Right.
You know, so we're going to protect the water. We're going to keep pushing them, and we know that it's possible to stop a pipeline. We just saw the Keystone XL get canceled. We just saw the Jordan Cove pipeline get canceled out to Oregon too, right? That was right. That was good work out there.
Down to the well, like the bell. Let the water ring me like a bell. Rock me, let the water rock me like a child. For this well will not run dry, nor this well will not run.
I'm here because I'm a faith leader, and so I'm interested in hearing what the request is for repair so that I can help lead a congregation in real practical terms, like not just talking about it and reading about it, but what does repair actually look like in action?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mirla. I'm going to put in the chat one more time that information so you can copy it. You can just do a little quick copy and paste, and you also at the end of any Zoom, it should send to you all of the things that were in chat to everyone or in chat specifically to you. So you should have that saved on your computer. The one other action just to let you know about is writing op-eds and letters to the editor. One of the points Mirla made was about the negative impacts of fossil fuel infrastructure. And one way to think about it is if you sink $300 million in a pipeline, you're not going to walk away until you've gotten that money back by running lots of fossil fuels in it. If you sink that money instead into green infrastructure, then you're not attached to that investment in the past in the dirty fuels. So right now, with lots of talk about infrastructure, we have the opportunity to tie both what should be happening with what shouldn't be happening and make that case. COJL, the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life, has been working with folks across the country to place op-eds and LTEs on infrastructure. And if you would like to do that, I put my email in the chat, and send me an email and we can work with you on getting something in your local paper. Again, thank you, Mirla, for both sharing that and for the work that you did, and for inspiring us to join in this important battle. We will hear in a little bit a video from another Jewish activist from that organization that Mirla mentioned, Dayenu. But first I want to turn to Rabbi Mitch Hescox, Reverend Mitch Hescox, same basic idea. But Mitch is the president and CEO of the Evangelical Environmental Network. And Mitch has got a lot of insight that I think we all can learn from in how we can more effectively contact our elected officials in their offices and do that as people of faith. As Mirla said, this is a special voice that really needs to be heard and that really can make a difference. So Mitch, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for letting the Evangelical be part of this fantastic gathering. So it's wonderful to be here and have a multi-faith opportunity to do something. So I'm going to share a little bit about my PowerPoint here and put it up. And hopefully it will now, there we go, come from the beginning. What I'd like to talk to you about is, it is extremely important, especially right now, for all the faith community to become engaged. In fact, this week may be the largest week ever for climate action in the United States to date. We could have a bipartisan infrastructure deal, which has many good things in it. Some of the things that I've been working on are the plugging of abandoned orphan gas wells. Just one of the great things that's in there. New methane standards are coming down the pike. And then, of course, there is the potential for the reconciliation package, a fancy term for a democratic movement for a clean energy standard, for more caring about more people infrastructure and caring about climate. And so if I were you, this week is a week to start getting on the phones and sending letters and emails to your members of Congress if you really want to see it, because it's all going to start to happen. Votes could happen as early as Wednesday. But I'd like to start out really with something very critical. Anytime you contact a congressional office, especially if you're meeting with them in person or now by Zoom, remember who you are. Remember that you are part of a faith community, that you have special beliefs and you are endowed by your Creator and your tradition to stand up for what's right. You're speaking for more than yourself. You're speaking for the thousands of people of your traditions, the millions over the generations who have codified our faith and came up with great traditions. I am not an expert in Hebrew, but in Leviticus 25, the way the Christians like me have identified it, it's the year of the Jubilee talking. And one of the great things it says, remember that the earth belongs to the Lord and you are but tenants. We don't have ownership, but a tenant has a responsibility to care for what God owns. And that's what we're representing. And also for me, for us as an organization, our tagline, our sort of slogan is creation cares a matter of life, because generally everything that we do centers around life, and especially human life. But remember that we have an obligation as people of faith to talk about justice and righteousness, about, you would probably say, the ultimate shalom. For me, it's the kingdom of God, being part of the earth. And I think that's what we're here. That's what we're here to talk about. And when you're meeting with members of Congress or state legislators or anybody, governor's offices, you have to do it from the basis of it's beyond yourself. It's just not your opinion. It's a moral, religious value that means something. Because right now, climate change is the greatest moral challenge of our time, because every single person on God's creation is affected by climate change. But it is also the greatest opportunity for hope in building a new world, a sustainable world with clean energy and clean jobs and everything else. Now, a little bit of practical stuff, but remember who you are. It's extremely important. But do your homework. Not only know the issues you want to talk to an office about, whether it's Pipeline 3 or climate change or whatever. If you don't have exactly the issues, call up people like Daniel or other people of your own tradition, or even me, and you can do the issues on what the actual issues about why you want it stopped and what the bill is and what the process is. But also, and I think this is the so critical part of it when you're working with Congress, is remind people why it's important to not you, but to your faith. How your work into your faith, about why it's important to more than just you, but to everybody. And I think that is so critical. And now I'll give you a couple little secrets that are on more than just the big stuff. But when you visit an office, know what's important to that office. I'll give you an example. Daniel and I went to a meeting. I took Daniel and wanted to go and visit Bob Casey's office. We both live in Pennsylvania, so Bob Casey's is our good senator right now, as we like to say. And the one thing that I can tell you that I know ultimately about Bob Casey, because I know him well, is his number one priority is protecting children. And so when you go and work with Bob Casey's office, you want to know and put everything for him in terms of why climate change is an issue of protecting children's health and lives. I hosted his coming out party in climate about 8 years ago at a Christian university in Philadelphia. It was an evangelical school. We had some Catholic sisters there, a couple priests, and it was a wonderful gathering to show the faith community supported his efforts to do it and how to do it. And hopefully most of you are going to be constituents when you call in, is let them know you're a constituent. Your vote matters to people. And believe me, emails, phone calls, and letters, but letters are so hard these days, personal letters to do it, from constituents are extremely important. And if you happen to be doing a Zoom or virtual meeting with somebody like Daniel or Marilee, if it's okay if I say that, make sure that it's the constituent that's doing the speaking, that they lead the meeting, because they're the ones who the person is depending on for the vote. And your voice matters. Now, Washington has a lot of big money and nobody's going to deny that. But still, a constituent voice is ultimately those banded together that make the difference. And I would urge you to really be part of that. Make sure that that's really key. And if you're talking to when having a meeting with a staff member, because most, 99 times out of 10, it's very difficult to get a member meeting, a member being either the representative or the senator. But I will tell you that August is coming up, and it's pretty easy, or a lot easier, to get a meeting with the member himself at home during the August recess. So while that might be, some of the good stuff might be over with, call your House of Representative, your member now, and ask for a meeting when they're back home in August. But if you're meeting with a staff person, one of the big things that I've found is recognize that they are a person too, that they want to be loved. They're just not a voice or a recorder for the senator or person. Especially if you're meeting with a junior staff member, they're paid terribly. They work exceptionally long hours. And it's really nice for them to know that you see them as more that note taker. And I can tell you, just on a personal basis, that if you treat that staff member as a person, you're likely to get them to really listen to who you are and why it's important to you. It's extremely important to do that, to care about that. Getting near to what the end I want to say and to talk to you, and I've been doing this a long time and I'm very successful, but not only get your demands and requests out there of why it's important, but ask how you can be of service to the office. Don't go into an office or even on the phone or Zoom meeting and just, what we like to say, be a talking head and do all the talking. Sort of dumping all the information you ever know on a subject matter. As I said, if you know what's important to the member you're talking about, there might be something you can find an agreement on in a way that you can help them. And congressional offices love it when you can help them out as well too. They know that you're just there for more than just being a single issue person. They're caring about who you are and what you are. And that remembers to my last point, is to remember that you are a witness and a representative of your faith. When I was a pastor for almost 20 years. Before that, believe it or not, I was in the coal industry for 14 years. But one of the first meetings I made when I left the pastor at the local church and became the president of EEN, I made a visit to a very dear friend of mine by the name of Gary Cook, who at the time was director of church outreach for a great organization called Bread for the World. Many people know it, know who they are, fantastic work. And I had a meeting with Gary down in Washington, D.C., and I said, Gary, I got this because I know how to be a lead and I know how to be a person, but I've been a pastor for 20 years. And Gary looked me square in the eye and said, Mitch, Washington, D.C. needs more pastors. Remember that you are a pastor. Act like a pastor. In your dealings with offices, represent your faith and be that pastor. Well, one of the ways that I do that, and Daniel can attest to that because I think I actually had Daniel do it when our one meeting with Bob Casey's office, is I always ask and offer to pray for a staff member or a member at the end of my meeting. I've been doing this for a lot of years now, and there's only 2 times in I don't know how many meetings, well, several thousand, that people have said no, that they would prefer that I not. And that's okay, and you respect that. But because of that, and my willingness to care for people, which is genuine and true, and I wouldn't do it if it's phony. But there are probably around 100, maybe 150 staff members, and actually 3 members of Congress that I'm their unofficial pastor for, their spiritual advisor. It's kind of an honor to get together and pray for 3 senators once a month. At 3 different times, we just get together to pray together. I do that for people that work in the White House too. And it's because, not that I'm special, but because I want to represent my faith and care about people, and would do that, you let your faith do the talking for dealing in climate change and any other issue you're working on. So go to work this week. Get out your phone book, get out your emails, call your member of Congress, tell them to vote for the bipartisan plan, tell them to vote, but we need more than that, that's just not one thing. But now is the time to act on climate. And this is our best chance in over 10 years to do it. And we have to have something be accomplished this week or over the next several weeks. So I thank you for allowing this evangelical to be part of your wonderful meeting. We're good at what we do. There have been a lot of successes that Daniel and I and all the religious communities part with, from taking mercury out of coal-fired power plants years ago, which was one of my favorite things, reducing methane pollution. But even though for some people the faith community is diminishing in the United States, God will never be diminished. And so no matter how you call God and what your tradition is, ultimately God is in charge, and we need to stand up and do what's right. And so thank you for this opportunity. It's really been a blessing to me to be part of it. And thank you so much for allowing me.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Do you have time for a couple of questions if we've got them?
Sure.
So because it's so difficult to call on people when there's several screens going on, if you want to put your question in a chat to everyone or to me or to Mitch, let's we have time for at least 2 or maybe even 3 questions if we've got it. And certainly
there's a place at the bottom where it says reactions. If you click on it, you'll see there's a way of lifting a kind of symbolic hand. It'll be much easier for us to see it that way.
Thanks. We have a question from Mike Hurwitz, who lives in Texas and says his rep is awful. What do you recommend for meeting with somebody when you're starting with a climate denier or somebody who really is in a different place on your position? How would you talk to them, Mitch?
I would talk to them just like I talk to anybody else, is when in fact share why this is an urgent matter to you. Share that why this is a concern from your faith. Because one of the things that even if people, still come up with reasons to against the science, they can't question your faith. So go in and talk to them about your faith. Miracles happen. It happens every day. And so I would continue to do it. It may not be the most successful, but I would certainly love to be there to share your faith of why this is an important issue, because they need to hear it. People who are deniers need to hear it from people of faith even more strongly, that this is a faith issue and not just a science issue, not a political issue, but an issue of their faith.
And the only thing I would add to that is to remember the other points that Mitch raised, which is that it always helps to treat a person as a person, even when you're in disagreement with them, to be interested in who they are and to treat them with respect is, I think, both the right thing to do morally and the effective thing to do. So we're going to take one more question from Bill Cousins.
Thank you, Rabbi Daniel. A question for Mitch. I'm also in Pennsylvania, and I appreciated your discussion of meeting with Bob Casey. I'm curious if you've had and how any meetings with Pat Toomey or his staff have gone.
I meet with Wes and Pat Toomey's staff probably once a month. It doesn't do me a whole lot of good. But I'm still there, and I always pray for miracles, as I said. But, actually one of the things that happened just recently that that I think we need to, at least from my perspective, there was a little bill called Growing Climate Solutions, which was a small bill that actually told the Department of Agriculture to set a carbon standard for what it really meant to sequester carbon on farmland. And so farmers could trade it, making money for it, just like knowing what a can of Coke weighs or has. And Bob Toomey, despite Wes calling me the night before the vote for an hour and a half, telling me why he wasn't going to vote for it, I asked him to go back to the senator with these reasons. And by gosh, Pat Toomey voted for Growing Climate Solutions. So it wasn't much, but it was something in the right direction. So you always do it. But, if you live in Pennsylvania right now, there are a lot of big things happening, and even on the state level. So please talk to Daniel or talk to me, because we'd love to have you working on not only federal things, but there's a lot of things happening in Pennsylvania right now, especially Reggie, which we need to have your support on for our Republican legislature in Pennsylvania.
Dan, I'd like to chime in with a question to Mitch as well. I worked for a couple of years as a legislative assistant in the House of Representatives a long time ago. But I discovered then that one of the most effective ways for people to lobby me was to ask me and my congressman to lobby them. That is, to ask us to come speak about some issue that they cared about. And once we were in the room talking with them about what we thought about their issue, it became very lovingly close to pay attention to them as well. I wonder if you've had experiences like that from the other end, from talking to the members and their staffs.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said that the first thing you do is know your homework. What is the most key issue for that member? As I said, Bob Casey, it's children's health. Other people have different issues. And so that going in of what their issues are, so you directly ask them about that. And number two, I am very sincere. You're asking about lobbying them. What is important to them? How can I help them move something of their interest? And, I'll give you a little example. A year or so ago, actually it was about 8 months ago, I had a meeting with Senator Thune's staff. And believe it or not, Senator Thune, a very strong Republican from, North Dakota or South Dakota, excuse me, wanted farmers to get a chance of some money that was in the last farm bill about doing experimental carbon sequestration on farms. And the Trump administration, quite honestly, just basically told people not to apply for it because they weren't going to give it away. So there was a big pot of money sitting there that would have helped farmers help deal with climate change. And Senator Thunes asked, well, can you help me get this extension put in the end of the year, the continuing resolution to keep funding the government? And guess what? We did it together. And now I have a lifelong friend with Senator Thune's office because we got that in. And it's a matter of doing what they said. So helping each other is a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitch. We really appreciate it. And if folks, as we go forward, have questions that you would want me to pass on to Mitch, again, please send an email to me or to Arthur, and we'll be in further contact. So now I want to share a video message from Dahlia Rockowitz, the Washington representative of Dayenu, which works on climate change for the Jewish community.
Good evening. My name is Dahlia Rockowitz, and I'm really pleased to be joining you from Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action. Tonight's program, closing out Tisha B'Av, is focused around moving from grief to hope. And what gives me hope is being a part of a Jewish community committed to climate action and achieving a just and livable future. Reflecting on tonight's program and the theme, From Grief to Hope, it made me think of the words of Jewish writer, historian, and activist Rebecca Solnit, which I'll share with you right now. It's important to say what hope is not. It's not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, one that invite or demand that we act. And to me, Solnit's words are really about the fact that hope is only as powerful as our ability to translate it into action. And this summer, we have the opportunity to do just that. For the first time in over a decade, and possibly the last time this Congress, we have the opportunity to pass meaningful federal climate policy. Congress is considering infrastructure and recovery legislation that could put us on a fast track to a clean energy future. And this includes historic levels of investment in clean energy, clean cars, energy efficient homes and buildings, and more. A commitment to target those investments to historically marginalized groups, rural communities, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, those who've borne the brunt of pandemic, poverty, and pollution for far too long, and providing training and support for jobs in conservation and clean energy and technology, plus childcare and healthcare support so that everyone can share in the benefits of this thriving clean energy future that we aspire to. But this legislation is far from a done deal. We'll need 50 senators on our side, and the forces of denial and delay are mobilizing. Recently, we got a window into what we're up against when Greenpeace UK leaked a video of an Exxon lobbyist bragging about obstructing climate action and actually naming the senators that they're putting the screws on. So we need to be the voice of science and justice, and we need to give our senators the courage to back bold climate action. Our job this summer is to demonstrate public support and win the 50 votes in the Senate to pass infrastructure and recovery legislation focused on climate action, good jobs, and environmental justice. For moderates, this means giving them courage to back an ambitious budget deal that meets our demands and reminding them that these proposals have broad public support. For progressives, it means giving them the courage to hold firm and not scale back or give in. And for climate doubters and obstructionists, it means calling them out for standing in the way of what science, justice, and frankly, the American people demand. We need to keep up the pressure and not let up, because as we've seen and as we know is true, the fossil fuel industry, they're not letting up. And how are we going to do this? Members of Congress are going to be taking several rounds of votes, so they need to hear from us throughout the summer and early fall. What you can do is you can use Dayenu's call tool, and I'll put the link to that on the screen right now. Dayenu.org/call. When you go to this link, it will enable you to contact your senators directly, and it will give you a script for what to say. I encourage you to call them tonight and to leave a message and to call back throughout the summer and fall to keep the pressure on. But we also need to be raising the stakes. Members of Congress will be home for much of August and September for what's known as August recess. And we want to bring the pressure to their doorsteps by planning in-person public-facing actions. To do that, we're looking to Dayenu circles, leaders, and allies to hold strategic public actions across the country in the months of August and September, when senators and House members are home. And it's fitting that this moment of sustained action coincides with the Hebrew month of Elul. As we know, Elul is a moment of transition, from despair and grief to hope and renewal as we prepare for the high holidays and the new year ahead. This is also the exact moment we're in politically. So, knowing that it's some Jews' practice to sound the shofar every day during the month of Elul, and it's a mitzvah to hear the sounds of the shofar during Rosh Hashanah and at the end of Yom Kippur, we'll be hosting communal shofar blowing actions at our senators' offices, hosting and sounding the clarion call for climate action. We're going to be doing this as part of and alongside a broad, multi-faith and secular climate justice movement. And as Jews, we have a unique role to play, raising our collective moral voice. We invite you to join us so that together we can plan and participate in public-facing actions aimed at our senators that are hopeful, that are full of moral clarity, and are energizing. Most importantly, these actions will demonstrate and are designed to showcase the broad-based public support, including from the Jewish community, that's needed to demonstrate and win climate action. So I'll put another link on the screen right now, dayenu.org/hearthecall. If you visit this website, you can learn more about how to get involved this summer. We've put together an action toolkit, and soon, once some of the actions are confirmed, they'll be listed there as well. So that's going to be your go-to location on how to plug in and participate this summer. Now, I know I've shared a lot of information in not that much time, but if there's one thing that you take away, it's actually going back to where I started about what gives me hope. And my closing pitch to you is that if there was ever a moment to go out of your comfort zone, this is it. This is our big chance for federal climate action, and we cannot let it pass us by. And there's no better way or better time to stretch yourself than in community, surrounded and working with others who share your commitment to a just and livable future. So let's make this a summer of action. Thank you.
And now I want to ask Arthur to share with us some additional thoughts.
Thanks. First, I want to say how remarkable, it may not have seemed that way, may have seemed like obvious that different organizations will be coming together to do this. The planet, after all, has many communities in it, and we certainly have been trying, the Shalom Center has been trying for about 15 years to bring together different communities out of that great ecological unity, the echad, the oneness that comes from all the life forms and all the human communities of the planet. And so it's been very exciting for me to see several of the organizations that are working in and not in the Jewish community, working in the faith community, coming together to do this. And I do want to say that COJL, the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life, and the Shalom Center have been crucial in making it possible and calling to invite and urge organizations that might feel, well, we have our own thing to do, to come together to do this. So I want to thank all of you who have come together to do this. And I want to say some special things about what we have been urging as focal points for action. I'm excited and fascinated to hear Dalia speak about the Jewish months and the Jewish festivals, and the whole notion of turning Tisha B'Av, not abandoning the grief and action involved in remembering the temples in Jerusalem, but turning toward Temple Earth, the universal temple of all life forms and all human communities, has been one of the things the Shalom Center has been working on for at least this 15 years. And it has grown to where this gathering was possible and beyond. And we're not stopping with Tisha B'Av. What is it that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur can do in terms, for example, of tshuva, of changing, turning? Tshuva literally means turning ourselves toward the truth, toward what's sacred, the truth of the danger to the earth and the sacredness of the earth itself. How many of our rabbis will spend this next 2 months writing the 4 major sermons that they give? They sweat, I know how they sweat to really make a dent in people's consciousness on those days. What could we be doing to encourage them to do that, to multiply our reality and our understanding of reality, to multiply it by what they say during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? And then we have Sukkot. Of all the Jewish festivals, Sukkot is the earthiest. When I wrote the book, Seasons of Our Joy, about the festivals, the publisher told me I had to write a glossary of Hebrew and Yiddish words. So one of the things I wrote was sukkah, hut with a leafy roof. It came back from the printer. It said sukkah, hut with a leaky roof. And I said, oh, that was God's typographical correction. I'm not fooling around with that. It's just as important that it was leaky, that it was open to the earth, to the rain, to the sun, to the wind, that it was open to all of that as that it was leafy. It was open to the leaves as well. And Sukkot is not alone in its attention to the earth. Sukkot, by the way, the rabbis decided, since there were 70 offerings when the temple still stood, the rabbis said, why 70? Well, they had this notion in their heads, a symbolic notion, that there were 70 different nations in the world, 70 different communities. And they said, at Sukkot, we don't pray just for the abundance, the harvest of the Jewish people. We pray for all the 70 peoples of the world. And that's perfect in terms of thinking about the climate crisis. How do we encourage abundance from the earth and not disaster from the earth? We have to learn how to do that. This coming year is, according to Leviticus 25, which Mitch mentioned, is the 7th year, the sabbatical year, the Shemitah year, the year of releasing the earth from being overworked. And the festivals are one important way for us to do that. I've begun thinking that the festivals, what are they? They all come from the engagement, you might even say the love affair between the Jewish people and the earth. They're all connected with the earth. We've put layers of history, layers of spirituality, but the deepest spirituality in all of them is the connection with the earth. Hanukkah, lighting lights at the darkest time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. One of the prophets, Zechariah, had this extraordinary, wild vision. It's in the Haftorahs for Hanukkah, that there should be trees, 2 trees, olive trees, right next to the great menorah in the temple. Well, that was a radical, a revolutionary idea. Most of the prophets said, no, there should never be trees. People might think it was pagan. And he said, yes, there should be olive trees because the menorah depends on the oil from those olive trees. And then he said something that was so wild that the rabbis wouldn't include it in the Haftorah. They stopped the Haftorah right before he said it. He said, and the olive trees will be sending their oil straight into the menorah. No human beings have to squeeze the olive. That was amazing and scared some of the people, so they wouldn't include it in the Haftorah, but they did include it in the prophetic teaching. So that's a teaching about how close we are, how connected, how Adam and Adamah, the menorah, which was made from a vision of a tree with buds and flowers and little clusters of leaves holding the buds up. It's all there describing how to make a golden version of a tree of light. And now with the olive trees helping it. We could go through all the rest of the festivals. We've been through what some of us have called the 11th plague. We know that Pharaoh, in his contempt and cruelty toward human beings, brought his contempt and cruelty on the earth as well. And the earth rebelled with locusts and frogs and ultimately disease that killed many of the Pharaoh's own people. That's because his attack on human beings and his attack on the earth were intertwined. Passover should be as much about eco-justice as it is about social justice. So there's another reason to focus on the holidays, the festivals, through the rest of the year. And that is the energy of being a Jew in America is often connected with those festivals. If we want people to feel passionate about the earth and about protecting it, then we should be encouraging them to feel passionate about the festivals that are given by the earth, given the seasons of the earth in joy. And when the earth itself and the Jewish people, along with all the other communities of the planet, the other human communities of the planet, when we are in trouble, like elders in trouble, where their children come to help them, those festivals, as I said, are the offspring of the love affair between parents who were the Jewish people and the earth. And the Jewish people and the earth need those festivals now to be turned not just as celebrations of the past, but as beckonings for the future, as energies to make a healing between Adam, the human race, and Adamah, the earthy community. So that we've begun to think seriously about Sukkot. And one of the things I would love to hear from you is what you would think in your own communities or in Washington, D.C. 45 years ago, the Shalom Center put up a sukkah on Lafayette Park across from the White House to say that what was then the big danger to the earth, and may still be one of the two big dangers, the nuclear arms race, needed to stop, and that the Jewish community wanted it to stop. And we put the energy of the Jewish community alongside the energy of Catholics and Protestants and Buddhists and Hindus to stopping the nuclear arms race. It did stop for a while, and now is in danger again of reviving it. And the climate crisis, CO2 and H-bombs are the two greatest dangers to the planet. So should there be a sukkah on Lafayette Park? Should there be people all over the country, people like you all who are from everywhere, carrying and shaking the palm branch and the etrog, the lemony fruit, the etrog, at the banks that are funding the burning of the planet? because they make money from the burning of the planet? Should we be doing that all over the country during Sukkot? So those are questions you can write. Actually, it makes sense to write me directly. So that's AWASKO, AWASKOW, at the, be sure to put the in, THE, the shalomcenter.org. And tell me what your own thoughts are about what we should be doing for Sukkot, as well as, I don't want to skip what both Mitch and Dahlia have said about the next 6 to 8 weeks, and focusing on your senators. If you're from Washington, D.C. and don't have a senator, even though you deserve one, maybe focus on the majority leader of the Senate, whose name at the moment escapes me, somebody will know it. Schumer, Schumer from New York. But if you're from any other state or jurisdiction, focus on both your senators. You can call them. The phone number that will get you there, it's easy to write down, is 202-22, that's Washington, 202-224, it's capital 4 actually, CA4 the CA stands for capital 4, 3121. And the operator there will ask you who you want, and you can tell them, a senator, if you don't remember the name, tell them what state you're from, and they'll tell you what senators you have, and they'll get you there. And the senators will be at home, as Dahlia mentioned and Mitch mentioned. They'll be at home, and we can reach them more easily that way. So be thinking about the festivals, about Sukkot, about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, about Sukkot, about Hanukkah, and we'll be in touch with what needs to happen through this year, the sabbatical year, when we're supposed to let the earth stop being exploited and overworked. So, Dibarti, that's what I had to say, and I hope we will, there may be more questions and more time. I don't know what the time is at the moment, but I'm certainly available, and I think the others of us are, for questions.
Shemati, thank you, Arthur, Yasher Koach, and thanks to all who participated by speaking or asking questions or just being here today. One more forward-thinking thing. In November is COP26, which is the next international negotiations on climate change. The Vatican, Pope Francis's office asked me to be a participant in a group of 40 interfaith leaders and 10 climate scientists that have been meeting each month for 8 months to issue a call in early October to the folks at COP26. And Arthur and Mirala and Dahlia and Mitch all gave some comments about that. So we'll be in touch with you as that proceeds sometime in October. Before, what I want to do for folks who have to leave is we've got a kind of a closing song, and then we'll let those who have further questions stay on as long as you wish. I'm going to also have to head up. I'm at my dad and stepmom's in New Hampshire, and I want to see them a little bit tonight before they go to bed. As we get older, we come closer and closer to what they call Quaker midnight, which is 10 o'clock. So if you've got questions, hold on to them just for a moment. This is a little piece, and I put also amidst the various things that have been in the chat, the donate page for the Shalom Center and for Kojal, and you also have Mirala's contact and heard some things from Dayenu. So that's in the chat. Here it is on your screen if you want to take a screenshot, and then to close the official part of our program and then have some time for questions afterwards. This is a song about that closing part of the book of Lamentations, Hashivenu, Help Us to Return, by songwriter activist in Philadelphia, Hannah Rothman. So thanks, everyone. And I'm going to turn things over to Arthur now for as long as he wants to answer questions, and as long as folks want to stay on with questions, that would be great.
Okay, I saw a hand there. Wait, Mike, there was one person before you, but I couldn't catch the name. All right, Mike, why don't you, and whoever else it was. Mike Hurwitz.
Great to see you. It's great to see everyone. Reb Arthur, you are a blessing to us. Please keep the flame ignited. My question really just has to do with this whole really dangerous, but also completely distracting focus on voting suppression. It just seems like this was designed a long time ago by somebody to prevent us from pushing forward our agenda. Here in Texas, we're really having to spend a lot of time focused on this, and it's quite frightening. I just wanted to get your comments on it.
Well, the healing of the planet and the healing of democracy, which means it's advanced, not just going back to normal, but the advancing of democracy, they're totally intertwined. They're totally intertwined. I mean, that whole business that I think Daniel mentioned about ExxonMobil, and the guy who was bragging maybe because he wanted a job, and so he was even expanding what he was talking about. But basically, he was telling the truth. Exxon knew in the mid-70s that their business plan meant burning the planet. Did they say, "Oh my God"? That would have been what they should have said. My God, we can't do that. We have to figure out a different business plan. In the mid-70s, a physicist and a guy named Lenny Rodberg, submitted a proposal to the Department of Energy under President Carter, who you remember actually put solar collectors on the roof of the White House. And the proposal was to look at community-based solar co-ops. And we did look and studied what it would mean. One of the things that the physicist, I didn't know that, but he did, and we put it in the proposal, was that CO2 was going to ruin the planet. And we better get out of the CO2 business. That was in 1978 or 9. And we got a grant from them. And we got a second grant after we submitted the proposal about what to do about it. And they issued a contract. And then Reagan was elected president and took the solar collectors off the roof of the White House. And it all ended. And the same time was ExxonMobil was lying its head off and buying some, not climate scientists, but other people with a PhD after their names, to talk about how it was all absurd. There was no such thing as a climate crisis. So democracy and the ability for the people to have elections, not auctions, is totally connected with our ability to change the disaster that is already beginning to happen to us. So you're right. And part of the energy of protecting the earth and ourselves as part of the earth has to be also protecting democracy. In this society, which is one of the biggest dangers or biggest supports for the change that needs to happen. So, okay, anybody else? There were some other people with hands up. I see Bob Schloss has a hand, but only a hand in the. Anybody? Well, if there are no more, maybe we can. Is that a hand, Alan? Was that a hand? Yeah, it seems like that was a hand. So
it is a hand, and I got to unmute.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of this, and especially the detail on line 3. And I am stirred to deal as best I can with the legislation that's in the Congress. Hopefully this can hold together and something actually get passed. But I feel in this beautiful presentation, yours and Sue Morningstar, that I did not hear at one time our responsibility in the larger world scale of the oil industry, the Middle East, the war in Yemen, and particularly in the Jewish role in some sense of justice and healing in Palestine, and the outrageous situation that is impressed upon the Palestinian people by the regime of occupation, checkpoints, and all of that, and that we who are part of this Jewish nation are silent about it in this time, to be attentive to the grief in the world that is perpetuated every moment for families, individuals who are of Palestinian character, community. And somehow it seems that this holiday should also give some voice to their situation, and their situation is not unrelated to the balance of power in the Middle East, which is deeply impressed with the pipeline politics and keeping the flow of oil going, quite apart from Line 3, which is very important in our little section of the world. But
Okay,
overall,
so Al, let me pick up from what you said already.
please.
There are many connections, not only, mostly with Saudi Arabia, about the importance of oil to the old economy and the nervousness of the U.S. government dealing with Saudi Arabia because they're still hooked partly on the old economy. The issues of how to deal with Israel and Palestine are a separate question, which the earth question is not the most important. The two societies are too small to make a big difference about that. They're, in fact, among the energies that are trying to talk across the border of Israel and occupied Palestine are earth-oriented communities, earth-oriented organizations that have ignored the boundary, because if you're dealing with the earth and with the Dead Sea and with the rivers, the Jordan River, the boundaries are not what you care about. So I think that in our concern about the planet as a whole, you're right, there needs to be some concern about the politics and economics and oilonomics of the Middle East. And as Jews, we are concerned about how the state of Israel behaves, how our cousins, descendants of Ishmael behave, how we and Muslims in the US might, instead of viewing each other with suspicion, try to see how our situations as, sort of outliers in the religious world have something to do with each other. We can do some of that. I don't think that Israel and Palestine are central to the poisoning of the planet. I do think Saudi Arabia is, and the United States is focused on not making any trouble, even when the most central figure in Saudi politics is clearly a murderer, literally, physically, and personally a murderer. So I do think we need to pay attention to that part of it if we're going to focus on protecting the planet as a whole. Any other thoughts that people want to raise? They don't have to be questions. What were people's thoughts in response to what I suggested about Sukkot and Lafayette Park and everything that would go with that? And I mentioned the the ancient ritual of waving those four fruit and three different branches of three different trees in what I was taught by Rabbi Shefa Gold is not the six directions of the world. You would think there's six directions to the world, right? Up, down, left, right, back, front. There's seven. As she pointed out, the tradition tells you every time you wave those, you come into your heart. And she said the seventh direction is inward. Maybe that's why Shabbat is the seventh day. Well, when I first did that, I didn't grow up this way, but I did that first when I was 40 years old and my son was 10. And I did it and then handed him the four species and said, so you do it now. And up to that moment, I think it was like the oldest conventional thing for Jews, traditional Jews, father to son. So he did it. And then I asked him a totally unconventional, untraditional question. I said, how did it feel? Nobody asked that question. They asked whether you got it right and the order and stuff like that. How did it feel? He said, I felt like I was a tree. It was my branches that were waving in the wind, and I could smell my own fruit. I was a tree. Well, he spent the last 15 years working on climate policy, international climate policy. I sort of wistfully, maybe wishfully, think that maybe that moment was why he's spending his time working on climate policy, because he got to be a tree and he understood what that meant in life. Well, can we carry that? Can we carry that to America in general? Can we carry it to banks that are perfectly willing to burn the planet and all the trees? So that's a question. It's not an answer. That's a question. What do you all think of that?
We're creating a community commons in Ann Arbor in the center of the city. I will see about putting up a sukkah and carrying out to the local banks. Might as well try. It's an interesting experience. Right now I'm in France. It's 3:30 in the morning. So I'm hanging in here. But I appreciate trying to see how to put these rituals, if that could energize the Jewish community in Ann Arbor and somehow to practice the preach. It's worth a try.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, sounds to me like, as one of the psalms says, speaking to God, to the breath of life, to you, silence is praise. So sounds to me like we're at the moment of praising in that way, through breathing. I have a notion, many of you know that I have a notion, and many of you have agreed with that notion, that the Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, the YHWH, name of God, has no vowels. And the reason it's YHWH is if you try pronouncing it, it just goes, which is the breath. So I think the name is the most basic of all names, all words. It's just breathing. And we interbreathe. Life on this planet is based in the interbreathing of animals and vegetation. So that's a name that really calls on us to protect that interbreathing. Pouring too much CO2 into the planet is exactly what means the earth can't breathe. So we can, and we are breathing, and we are breathing quietly. And I think it's time for us to end our facing each other over this peculiar version of the circle and enter into the week when, as we hear, will be important for us to be in touch with, especially our senators. Be well.
Yeshkoach.
So, and Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Shalom to all of us, to all humanity, to all.